I'll give you a story, my own piracy. I was driving this $1 million boat. It was this 40-foot power boat. We're flying through the harbor. I saw a lot of my friends, they finished the AT. They went back to kind of the same job, worked, under the impression that they were going to quit, do the PCT, which they did, and then they would do the CDT, and then all of a sudden they're back to the same place that they were before. Well, communication is huge no matter what, and I try to preach it all the time. When you live these extreme lifestyles, it's very easy to think that you're a singular individual, that you don't need others, and you're somehow disconnected from society, but it is in an exceptionally long walk. You got to really have a reason to be out there if you're going to attempt such a thing. And I go to jump on this other rock and I hear the metallic rattle of a snake. And I'm like, oh crap, I step back, almost hit the girl into a pit of snakes behind me. But through the whole course of that 6-month journey, you've come to realize that you hate your job, you don't want to be going to the same place, but a lot of people will fall into the trap of going back to the same job because it is relatively easy to do. Having a story is just so valuable.
Welcome to the Winging It Travel Podcast with me, James Hammond, where every Monday I'll be joined by guests to talk about their travel stories, travel tips, backpacking advice, and so much more. Right now, I'm taking the podcast on the road travelling with me, so tune in every week for short form episodes detailing all my travels alongside my Monday guest episode. Are you a backpacker, traveller, gap year student, or simply someone who loves to travel? Then this is the podcast for you. This is a casual, informative podcast designed for you to inspire you to travel. There'll be stories to tell, tips to share, and experiences to inspire. Welcome to the show. Let's get into the episode. Hello and welcome to this week's episode where I'm joined by Merrill Charette, who is an avid traveller, hiker, podcast producer, marine consultant, and CEO of Shipshape and MIDA. Merill is currently living on a sailboat, which has been doing that for the last 5 years. He's been a key character in a book relating to him through-hiking the Appalachian Trail, and he's also the host of Shipshape Podcast. I'm keen to hear his thoughts on the term winging it. Welcome to the show, Merill. How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing pretty good.
Glad to have you here. Where are you currently based?
So I am currently based in Boston, Massachusetts, where I've been living on a sailboat in Boston Harbor for the past 5 years.
Nice. And Boston Harbor, is there a reason for that?
I had originally come up to go to law school, ended up dropping out of law school and starting the whole living on a boat career. So it was kind of inevitable that my extremes would eventually lead me to this whole minimalism, living on a boat thing.
Nice. Got a random question for you then. So if you're living on a boat right now or you want to, is there certain ports in America that are better than others? Or is there certain rules where you can't go to certain ports and live? Is there any rules like that?
So the thing about being on a boat and traveling is that you can anchor for free anywhere. You just need to find an anchorage. So it can make it quite an affordable way of traveling. In the same time, you can also grab dock space, which does come with a price tag. And the ports in America, for instance, are very connected with the overall wealth of the community. So if you're going to a wealthy area, it's going to have a nice marina. If you're going to poor places, yeah. Okay,
and I've got some questions actually. I've not actually written them down on the notes, so these might be a bit random. Just about boat life in general, just logistics. I'm thinking internet/TV. Is that pretty easy to set up?
So it depends on to what extreme you're living on a boat. Everyone's heard the houseboat stories, but there's also a group of people that are cruisers that sail full time. When it comes to the internet, it can be a little bit tricky. The whole Starlink thing that's going on right now, I'm starting to see a lot of boats use that. I'm not too sure on how well it's doing, but for the most part, if you time up where you anchor and where you are with a hotspot, you can figure it out.
Next question is, for an address, do you still need to have a PO box on land, or can you have your address fully on a boat?
So I'm the type of boater that's like the champagne boater. So I'll go out and sail around the New England area. I'm not
Yeah.
doing any big trips. So I have a home base and I get all my mail shipped to that marina. The marina has like a whole office with everyone's name in it.
Oh wow, this is like a whole new world. Yeah, I know nothing about it. Yeah, it's mental.
Yeah, there's certainly a decent population of people that live on boats, and you would never expect it.
Why did you choose to live on a boat?
There was something about the ocean or the water that just created the mystical idea of what it could actually be like. And let me tell you, it ended up being that way.
Okay, and I'll tell you one thing I would probably appreciate on a boat is maybe the silence. I live in an apartment block here, right? So I can hear both next doors, whether it's daytime, nighttime's not too bad, but there is something going on. And I do get a bit annoyed at that. Even if you're a house and you've got a next door neighbour, it's going to be slightly noisy. But I was like, oh, is there anywhere that's silent? Unless you've got a big house detached and you've got a lot of money, maybe a boat might be the next option.
Yeah, I'd say that the boat is probably a good option for silence. Even though I'm in Boston Harbor, which is a pretty big harbor
Yeah.
in the city, you don't even realize that you're in the city.
Oh, mental. That's crazy. Another question I thought of as well then. Busy port. Do boats come in at like early hours, 1 and 2 a.m.? Like, is there a rule where they're supposed to keep the noise down, if you like, but, respect people who are living there?
Well, there's all sorts of regulations within the harbor itself that ships can't be flying through the harbor. So you
Yeah.
barely hear anything. I do hear, because I live on a sailboat, I do hear a propeller of a huge tanker ship coming in. As the blades turn on it, it creates this cavitation which makes this noise. It's pretty wild.
Okay, that's awesome. And a sailboat, I'm absolutely in the dark here. Is there a difference between a sailboat and maybe another type of boat that someone would live on? Like, is there different types of boats?
So the type of boats that people live on can either be a houseboat, which
Yeah,
is more of a stationary type thing.
yeah.
Then you have the power boats, which you get certainly a decent amount of room and the boat is able to travel places, but the cost of fuel is a handicap because those engines definitely do guzzle up a ton of fuel.
Mm.
And then you have the sailboat, which is the slowest, but it's relatively cost efficient to go, but the space is also pretty small too.
Mm. And what is the space like from your living space, if you like?
I have 2 bedrooms. I have a bathroom with a walk-in shower, oven, sink, refrigerator, I got everything. I'd say it's probably around 500 square feet inside the cabin. And then on the
Okay.
deck, it's about 700 square feet. I got like outdoor seating, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's doable. 100%. Yeah, yeah. This might be a weird question. Do you have a car? Like, just park on the mainland?
Yes, I got a car. I got
Oh,
a
okay.
car, got a motorcycle.
Yeah,
Only thing I don't have is a regular bicycle.
got it. Okay. And you're in Boston. Someone quoted me last week on my podcast that if you're American, you should go to Boston just to learn a bit of history about the place in terms of the country. What's your thoughts on Boston?
Well, Boston is certainly the birthplace of the Revolution. So you got that.
Yeah.
There's tons of historic things, which just makes the bars just a little bit cooler.
Okay. And a bit of like old buildings there, right? Like there are some of those about, right? Not too new.
Yeah, it's certainly one of the only places around that'll have really old buildings. And there's history on every single block, either some revolutionary thing or some guy got into a tavern brawl and shot this other guy there.
Nice. Okay. And where did you grow up originally in the US?
So I was originally from central Massachusetts, so not Boston, but I went to 4 different high schools. So I actually kind of traveled a little bit through Massachusetts and Maine going to schools. Eventually went to college in Memphis, Tennessee.
Oh,
So
okay. Wow.
within the United States, I've done a little bit of traveling.
Is that following your parents? Because you're moving around different high schools? Is that the reason?
I was just pretty good at sports at one point in my life,
Oh,
and
really?
kept getting recruited out to different schools.
Oh, wow. What sports were you good at back in the day?
So lacrosse, have you ever heard of it?
Do you know what? It's actually quite big here, lacrosse in Vancouver. Yeah, it's one of the cheapest sports to go and see, but never seen it. Don't even know really what's going on. I know like basic stuff, but like nothing genuine. Like,
Yeah, you got the whole box lacrosse up in Canada.
yeah. And any other sports apart from lacrosse?
Well, that's really about it.
Okay.
Just lacrosse.
Yeah, yeah. And also, Boston is known for the Boston Celtics, right? If you're a basketball fan, which I'm slightly a basketball fan, so I do know that.
Well, New England has literally all the best teams. You got the Celtics, you got the Bruins, you got the Patriots.
Patriots, yeah.
So, I
What
mean,
place?
Boston is number one.
New England is an awesome place to go and visit, right? Especially this time of year, in the autumn, maybe.
Well, by this point, it's more cold and all the
Okay.
leaves are off the trees.
Yeah.
But New England is most definitely known for its beauty. You have Maine, which is internationally known. And obviously Boston, you got Rhode Island, that's beautiful coastline.
Mm.
The rest of the country, doesn't really compare.
It's actually a bit of a slight dream of mine to visit, and hopefully we will do next year, New England. I think we're going to go across, then down through Canada, through Maine, right? I think travelers kind of see those like pictures on Instagram or social media where it's those like rolling hills, all different colors in the fall. I think that's what people imagine when you're driving through those little towns and those awesome roads.
For sure, if you're going in the fall. So you got to time it up.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you are in marine sort of career field. So tell us about that. How did you get into that area? I know one person at home who's a marine biologist. That's pretty much about it. So it's quite a unique field. So how did you get interested in that?
I kind of stumbled into it for the most part. Pretty much everyone in marine, if you ever talk to anyone that's in it, their plan was never to actually be in it. They just stumbled into it. And that's very much the same thing. So when I started living on the boat, I was concerned that I was going to be the only person that actually lived on a boat because I'd never even heard of too many people that did it and all this other type of stuff. So the first guy I meet ends up being my business partner. And the thing about the Appalachian Trail, the thing about living on a boat is that the community is quite strong. And I feel that a lot of people that live a normal lifestyle of the home or whatnot, the condo, that the community structure really doesn't exist like it does in the extremes. So from that exposure and just meeting people, I eventually built a general contracting company for yacht repair in Boston. And then kind of through that, realizing that I did want to travel and I do want to be able to go wherever I want, realize that I got to use technology in order to do that. So I transitioned from what I was doing as a general contractor to creating a web platform that essentially does what I do. It connects boat owners and yacht owners to service providers, the people that work on boats. And right now, we're the National Directory of Marine Repair and Refit. Then I have several other companies, but everything was moving towards the ability to be able to work remote, which is what everyone kind of strives for. And with that, if you find a niche, there is a lot of opportunity to be able to work remote.
I think that's the thing, right? The niche. I think 100% I want to work remote and not be fixated to a place, if you like. As always, it's the key question is like, how can I do it? What is the niche? What can I do that brings an income where I don't have to be in one place at a time? It's quite a hard question. I think a lot of people are trying to figure that out.
Yeah, it's certainly a difficult one to do. I was trying to figure that out for the longest time. But there's so many jobs out there that no one would ever even realize existed that allow for you to have like the travel opportunity. It requires some dedicated effort to find, but they're out there.
Yeah, especially more now though, right? After COVID, even normal jobs are becoming remote, right? Where you don't have to go into the office.
I don't know how true that is. From
Okay.
what I've seen in Boston, is that during COVID, obviously a lot of people were remote, but then the office, like all these major companies, were essentially that you had to at least come in once a week to the
Yeah, same
office.
same as me.
So it just locks you up. And at the during COVID, I went sailing just nonstop with the girlfriend at the time. And then as soon as the office was like, you got to come in once a week, all the sailing dreams were dashed. I was like, oh, I think I got to move on.
You are right though. It just takes 1 day a week, and you're still locked in. Yeah, I've not even thought about that actually. Yeah, I think a lot of people here in Vancouver they realised that they can do a fully remote job for a company over east, right, Toronto way, Montreal, and get paid a little bit more. So I think they're starting to realise that they can still do that at home. But yeah, I don't know many people who are fully remote. It is 1 day a week, the hybrid model, if you like.
I guess it comes down to just starting your own company, right?
I think it's the only way. Whether that is another question. But I think if you want full autonomy and mobility, I think it has to be your own thing. I can't see any other way. Unless you're rich, you have to work. Um, yeah, it's a tough one. But what do you think is the future of work? Do you think they will go to fully remote, or do you think they'll just sort of filter back to what it was before COVID?
They'll fill it back. There's you hear a lot about the working remote, but on the flip side, you also hear a lot of people that had a community when they were at work and want that back. So
Yeah,
who really knows what's going to happen? But I bet there it'll be a hybrid model. That's likely the future.
yeah, because I read something about this whole situation where for introverts, it is a great time. You don't have to go in because the modern workplace of 5 days a week, that's kind of built really for extroverts. You've got to interact all day, every day. You've got to obviously do your work. It's built for extroverts, right? So if you're introverted, it's probably a bit of an extra stress to go in. But when COVID happened, it's like, oh, great, I don't have to go in. I can stay at home. So for those people, it was great. But I think, yeah, those people probably leave if they can find jobs that are fully remote because they don't want to go back in 5 days a week.
For sure. I've also met a ton of people along the way who have been in that scenario where they were like introverts and they're like, I'm going to go and I'm just going to work on the boat and I'll be able to sail and all this other type of stuff. But they end up being so busy Monday through Friday that they're like, oh, I can't really sail.
That's where you got to be strong, isn't it? Yeah, there's pros and cons. I guess people do become more busier at home because they're not distracted, if you like, at the workplace. Do you miss like any part of not being on the boat? You know, like the normal sort of like condo life, if you like.
The only thing that I miss of living on land is a dishwasher. Only thing.
Dream. That is a dream, isn't it? I think it's the number one appliance you need. It saves
Certainly
so
as
much time.
yeah, as a man, I'm just like, oh, these dishes, I just can't ever see. They just always pile up. They're impossible to deal with. My stress level is directly correlated to if there's anything in the sink.
I hear you. I'm the same as you on that. Another good point you made earlier about the condo life, about the community aspect, where there's not really any, if I'm honest. I wonder, why is that? Like, why is that a thing? Do you think in the previous days and years, like it would have been a more of a communal aspect, or has it just always been like this? Do you think? Because I don't know anyone in this condo building that's like, I don't know, 25, 30 flats.
I think that technology plays a role in why we are the way we are today. And I say that because past communities didn't really grow up with the ability to instantly be connected globally to anyone.
True.
And so it was very easy to tell where you fit in within your community, which created kind of a reason for people to go and meet everyone else within the community. But now you can instantly connect with anyone. You don't really need to rely on the community for anything, why would you necessarily want to meet anyone?
And is that a good or bad thing?
Oh, it's certainly an awful thing. It's absolutely terrible. Communication is just declining quite rapidly. Because I'm in the whole business scene and I do go to networking events quite often. It's kind of like one of my side hobbies to meet new people, try to get off the boat a little bit.
Yeah.
And the communication skills pre-COVID and post-COVID substantially different. And being in the boating industry, we increased how much we sold everything. Like boats went through the roof. Everyone was trying to be outdoors. Everyone was boating all the time. It was like COVID never even happened for me at all.
Wow.
And so coming into post-COVID events and talking to people, I have about 2-year extra communication skills from everyone else.
Yeah, and I think I've noticed that myself, like pre-COVID, like such a different world, but like post-COVID, like we had a sort of after-work drink the other day, and it's tough. It's almost like I've forgotten how to communicate sometimes in person. Like, what do you talk about all the time? That I struggled with it a little bit, and I never have done before. So it's an interesting dynamic, but also the technology doesn't help you, right? Because you don't have to do anything physically anymore. It's weird, isn't it? Because sometimes you can go to like a social setting, not say too much, but then you could like just message them on your phone and say more on that than you did in person. It's a strange world.
Yeah, certainly. And one of the things about it is, I mean, your whole podcast is about traveling, right? So the people that do go out and live a slightly more difficult life of exploring the world and meeting all these different cultures, those are the type of people that have stories to tell.
Yes.
And so having a story is just so valuable that people don't even realize to what extent you can use a story to like get new job positions or make friends with people. So the people that are going out traveling and experiencing are going to be way better off than the people that are stuck inside calling Uber Eats for all their meals.
You're right. And not to be too harsh on the people who don't go traveling, but they, in comparison, don't do that much, right? Because like, you're right. If you're going traveling and you're dotting about to different states or different parts of the world, you've got a story to tell. Like there's going to be some stuff that you got up to and people that you've met. But if you're just a generic Joe, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, and you probably watch a bit of sport, there's not too much to go with there, is there?
Certainly not.
That's why the podcast is easier. Yeah, you're right.
I do other podcasts where I get interviewed and it's on communication. And one of the things that I tell them is that go out and have some crazy experiences so you can tell a good story.
Yes. Yeah. And I miss that as well. I miss the whole experience of getting experiences, meeting different people, different cultures, just doing different things. I kind of miss that really a little bit. So that's hence why I think we're going to do a bit more travel next year. But it's just been culminating into this sort of like post-COVID world.
Don't get old on me, James.
And growing up, did you have much travel in your life? I know you're a recruit for sports, but did you dot around the US like on holiday or on vacation?
Not really. My dad was a consultant for IBM and traveled to pretty much every single continent and traveled to hundreds of countries.
Wow.
But we never did much of any of that. We went up to this one spot in Bar Harbor, Maine every year, and that was the extent of our traveling. Certainly, I was asked, my parents were like, oh, would you want to go to Europe or maybe see Disneyland? And at the time, I was like, why would I do that? You know?
Did your dad like do leisure stuff as well as business?
Just straight business.
Wow. That's a missed opportunity, isn't it? Just have one extra day where you just visit the town or the city you're in or the country, right?
I'm sure he did that. He just never told me any of those stories.
Fair. Okay. Because I interviewed someone who does a podcast about business travel. And his whole podcast premise is he wants to meet like high performing business people. They can be like artists as well, musicians, And it's not really about what they do. It's about when they're off on tour or on business, what do they do when they're there that's not work? Do they check out for a day? Do they stay an extra bit of time? And how do they marry that with their work? It's quite an interesting dynamic.
Well, I am sure that's probably why my dad hated his job.
Oh, really? You traveling when you're younger, did it inspire you that you want to be on water and not on land? Like, where did that transition come into place?
I've been just jumping from one drama to the next drama. I haven't done any traveling, not from any particular reason to other countries, but I will say that next year I'm going to be going through Europe. Just started dating this German girl.
Yeah.
So I am pretty much obligated to go to Germany and Africa. So next year, going to be doing a tour through Europe, get to see all the different cultures. I'll dress up as much of an American as I possibly can. Maybe an American flag shirt.
Yeah.
See how I'm received by the general population.
Yeah, it'll be fine. You'll be right. You don't see that many Americans traveling for leisure, so you might be quite unique in that sense.
Well, one of the things that I definitely am interested in seeing is all the old architecture of all of those countries, because in the United States, everything pretty much starts at the 1600s. That's the farthest thing that you can find. So going over to Europe and being around that type of architecture, I think will be quite fascinating.
Any like specific countries or places that you really want to go to? That's like almost at the top of your list.
Well, conveniently, I really wanted to go to Germany. That was number one on my list.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to check out the coast of Germany. But luckily, the girlfriend's dad has a 60-foot boat on the coast of Germany. So
that suits you quite well. Yeah. Yeah. They've not got too much of the coast up north. It's like a little bit. Yeah. It's interesting. I don't think many people go to Germany to see that. I think they go more like south, like to Bavaria or to like Berlin, for example. So that'd be quite interesting.
I would have loved to get into Russia, but I don't think you can really do that these days.
Yeah, that would be slightly tricky. Yeah. I think they've got their... I don't want to underestimate it. They've got their issues. Yeah. But that's great. So you're going to go to Europe. Are you going to jump on the train? Because you can train through Europe, right?
I'll do something, right? Isn't that where Gandhi came up with his preeminent work on the train through Europe?
No idea. But it sounded like it would be a cool thing to do. When you're growing up in the US, did you have many trips like on the water? Hence what you do now.
Well, the first time I had ever even camped was the first day I was hiking the Appalachian Trail. The first day I had ever been on a boat in my entire life was the day I had got the boat. So
oh wow, okay.
I generally do things where I'm starting at ground zero. So perfect timing to do this whole traveling to Europe, right? I go from nothing to a lot.
Oh, that's great. You just like jump into something, no experience in doing it, to see how it goes. That's quite brave.
I guess it's just a level of risk, right?
Yeah.
And what it comes down to is how risky you want to be. Starting a business is risky. Starting a podcast can be risky. Traveling is risky. So at what extent are you willing to risk things? It depends on every person.
Do you think a lot of people avoid risk most of the time?
Oh, for sure. Everyone is. We're like naturally inclined as human beings to avoid things that have the potential to make us lesser within the community or risk life and limb and the amount of money that you have. Yeah, everyone avoids risk. That's probably where anxiety comes from and all those other emotions that people have.
Yeah, I think podcast is an interesting one, isn't it? Because a lot of people probably got a story to tell, something, right? And they probably want to talk to someone or talk to random people and meet people or have a co-host where they discuss issues, but they don't, right? But there's also risk that they avoid, but there's also the hard work that goes alongside it, right? We've all thought of great ideas, haven't we? Most people don't actually action on them. So it's quite interesting where you've got the risk element, but also, am I going to go into it, like fully into it and put 100% in?
Yeah, what I tell people is you got to find a passion. honestly. And people throw passion out there like this loaded word
Yeah.
without really understanding the meaning behind it. And so how it's come to affect me, it's like I can pretty much do this whole remote life thing because I found a passion and I became an expert in it. And because on my podcast, I interview like the leaders of all the different segments of Marine. Their big thing is find a passion, become an expert, and you're good.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people do struggle to find that passion, right? Like, that might take decades.
Certainly. And it takes like active looking, and but with everything, the easy way is not necessarily the fastest way or the best way to go. And putting yourself in comfortable positions, I really think that you get to kind of learn something about yourself that will dramatically affect what you decide to pursue in your life.
Yeah, and do you think, like, let's say someone looks at you and you live on the boat, you've got your companies that you own, and they're a bit jealous of that. Is that because they just don't have the strength to go and do it themselves?
Well, I try to surround myself with other people that are extreme, that are able to resonate with what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I've heard plenty of stories where people do extreme things, but their friends don't do any of those.
Right.
But they stay in contact, which when you're doing all this adventure and stuff and you reach out to your past friends who aren't doing any of it, they can't relate to any of your struggles. If anything, they get kind of like, oh, you're complaining type of deal. So I try to just surround myself with extremes so none of those issues show up.
Yeah, I think when you get older, that becomes more difficult, right? The classic one could be example of your friends who've got kids and you're still traveling around on the boat or doing a bit of traveling in Europe. Completely different paths there that you can't really even both relate to because you're in such different parts of the lifespan, right, of where you are. So I think that could cause a bit of, not problem, but yeah, you might drift away a little bit.
Well, I am 30. You'll have to contact me when I'm 50, and maybe I'll have a different tune.
Well, I'm 33, so I'm roughly the same age, right? But we are getting to that age now where if you have got friends that have been there for a long time and are not on the same adventure as you, they are going to be doing completely different stuff. But the problem I have is that, is that a problem? I don't know. I don't like people who say, oh, I'd love to do that. I'm like, well, you say that, but do you though? Because if you did love to do that, you'd do it, wouldn't you? You wouldn't choose the path that you've chosen to not do that. You know, if there's that much love there, you go and do it. It's quite a weird aspect when you tell people like, oh, I'm going traveling for 6 months. Oh, I'd love to do that. Well, just go and do it then.
I've certainly heard, especially with the Appalachian Trail, every person that you run into and you tell the story about walking 2,200 miles, they all say, that's my dream. And all the people that I would run into on the Appalachian Trail that were old, because I started in February, so kind of the winter time, where all like the old people were walking through the twilight of their lives, they would all grab me and be like, don't save it till you get older. That's the biggest lie that ever was.
Yeah, I hear that. Okay. And do you think like the title of my podcast, Winging It, is kind of loosely related to this, right? Just kind of go for it, go with the flow, take risks, take opportunities, be a bit spontaneous. Like, what's your thoughts on the phrase winging it?
So my thoughts on the phrase are pretty much just go do it. And if you treat people with respect, you will get respect. And I think that by just going out and actually seeing the world or meeting all these interesting people, many doors open that aren't necessarily discussed as much when you start thinking about adventure, and how many opportunities are missed because of a fear of going into the unknown, because that's essentially what it is. Winging it is, you have to survive in the unknown.
Yeah, and I think the unknown can be different aspects. It could not just be travel. It could be like, I don't know, quitting your job to go and be unemployed for 3 months. That could be scary. But if you take 3 months off and you wing it and you learn a new skill, for example, that could go on to something else. So how are you going to know if you don't wing it in a little bit and just take a risk? It's kind of where it comes from, really.
Yeah, I've heard a bunch of stories of people that go and do these long distance hikes because obviously I'm coming from that background.
Mm.
And a lot of people that will start a hike, they'll figure out a way in which they can take a 6-month period of time off. And in their mind, they think that they're going to come back to a steady job, the job that they were doing before. But through the whole course of that 6-month journey, you've come to realize that you hate your job. You don't want to be going to the same place. But a lot of
Yeah.
people will fall into the trap of going back to the same job because it is relatively easy to do. And I've seen so many people have major mental problems as a result. When people go out on journeys, I say quit everything that you're doing and essentially don't plan to come back. Do something new.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, yeah. There's a stat that I read. I've said it on the podcast a few times, but I think 13-14% of people would say they love their job. So I think that the bottom 25% would say they hate their job. They detest it. They do it. And you've got the people in the middle who kind of just like cruise through life because it's easy. But that's like, I don't know, 80 odd percent of people who either don't like their job or just getting through. But like, you do 40 hours a week for, I don't know, US might be what, 2 or 3 weeks off a year if you're lucky. That's a lot of time, isn't it, to do something that you don't like? Like, how do people put up with that?
Who knows? But as you can probably tell from all the statistics on anxiety and mental problems, they're probably not handling it too well.
No, because it is the fear of letting go of that job, right? Because it is probably easy and it gives you a certain amount of money per month or week.
Well, I've seen the tricking that a lot of these corporations do, where I know a guy who lives on the boat. He has all the means to start his own business, but he won't. And he will keep coming up with all these different reasons about how he's going to next year quit and how the year after that he's going to quit. And these corporations will be like, well, if you stay in for one more year, we'll give you a $20,000 bonus. So they say, oh, well, I just need to wait till the bonus and then I'm going to quit the job. But by at that point, they're going to be like $50,000 bonus. You stay for another year.
Yeah, it's like the I don't know if it's the right analogy, really. You know, you watch the Pablo Escobar series on Netflix. I can't remember what it's called. Narcos, I think it is. I remember like thinking there's some people who just go into like that sort of world. For example, I'll just dip in, do a job, get the money, then leave. But they never leave because they like get offered more and more money. It's like the same sort of thing as the corporations. Like they just offer you more and more and more. And by the time you get to 45, you're like, oh God, I just wasted 15 years doing something I didn't actually like. And what I've got to show for it, I've got a house and a car and no experiences. That's, for me, that's awful.
And then they just randomly fire you one day and just kick you right out.
Yeah. Yeah. Everyone's dispensable, right? Or disposable. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no one's indispensable. You're right. And a lot of people do kind of run on that fear of not having that monthly income. It's a pretty damn shame.
Yeah, certainly because I live such a minimalist lifestyle, I don't necessarily feel that there's a ton of attachments that are on top of me, like burdening me. I got a car, but the boat already has a couch built in. I don't have a couch. Don't have any chairs. I got my laptop, got the mic. That's really all I need.
Yeah.
Really. So I can get up and go wherever I want. I don't feel like there's anything locking me down because if you've ever seen the movie Fight Club, all the things that you own end up owning you.
Yeah. You're absolutely right.
I think debt is the modern day slavery.
It is.
Especially student debt. In the United States, how many people have, I can't really speak about Canada. So in the United States, so many people have these student debts that they're essentially forced into having to work a job.
Yeah. Student debt is actually one debt I don't see as a problem, but it's only from a UK perspective. Because in the UK, the student debt is a government funded debt. So this doesn't affect your credit score, and it also doesn't mean they're going to come knocking on your door demanding payment. They just automatically take it when you earn a salary in the UK. So I have got a lot of student debt. Like I'm talking about, must be in US dollars around 50,000, I think, which for UK is a lot. I've not paid a penny back because I've not really been there. I'm not earned enough there. And I don't intend to pay any back. But that's not going to affect me in like a mortgage debt, for example. Like they're not going to come knock on your door and take stuff away from you.
Mm.
But yeah, the US and Canada is interesting, especially US with student debt. I still can't get my head around it, but I get the impression that if you go to college, unless you pay for it outright, you are going to be getting a loan, right, to pay it off.
Pretty much everyone is forced to have a loan unless you're exceptional at academics or you're brilliant at sports.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So that's the double-edged sword. And I've heard stories of people coming out with $200,000 in debt. And it makes you think, well, what were you thinking, right? Because at my level of business, you start to realize that where you went to college has very little impact on how people like perceive you. And the funny thing about all these colleges is they try to say that the cost is so high because of the network that you can possibly gain from going to the school. Like if you go to Harvard, you clearly have a lot of connections, but unless you use the connections, it's totally worthless.
Pointless. That is a lot of money. And you're right. If you got that off the bat, is there interest on that as well?
Oh, for sure.
Oh, for fuck's sake. Oh, wow. Okay. That's grim. That is pretty grim. It's not like a small amount, like $2,000 for a phone. That is like 50, 100,000 US dollars that off the bat, when you're pretty much an adult, you've got to pay that back. And then I guess you're expected to buy a house, aren't you? Like, I don't know, 10 years down the line. Then that's a new one. Forever in debt. Yeah. Pretty scary thought. You talked about hiking earlier. Gonna dip into that because you've done a few things here. The Appalachian Trail, for people who don't know much about it, what is that trail and how long is it?
So the Appalachian Trail is 2,200 miles. I don't know what that is in kilometers.
Miles is good. Yeah, we'll do miles.
And it goes from Georgia to Maine. It's one of the three big national scenic trails in the U.S. You have the PCT, you have the CDT, and the AT. The AT is a fairly rugged trail, and it's the hardest physically out of the three trails. The other two trails are horse-rated trails. You have any you want to hear a good story about the Appalachian Trail?
Yeah, please. Yeah, go on.
Because it starts in Georgia and it goes all the way up to Maine, you run into poisonous snakes in the first kind of half into 3/4 of it. And I have this deathly phobia of snakes.
Right.
So I started in February, and it wasn't until I hit Virginia that I saw my first snake ever in the wild, this giant timber rattlesnake. But I had been hearing the entire Appalachian Trail that when you get to Pennsylvania, it's where all the snakes are.
Okay.
So hiking along, get to Pennsylvania, I reach the top of this mountain, and my trail family is another mountain ahead, the group that I was hiking with. And they shoot me a text message, and I get this signal just for like an instant. And they say, get ready. There's a ton of snakes. And I get to the valley. I start having a panic attack. I can't do it. I can't go up this mountain. I've already walked 1,600 miles or some crazy amount. I can't do it. Can't make it up. Pretty much get dragged up by the girl I was dating at the time. Get up top. There's this little note card at the top of this mountain, and it says snake with an arrow. And it's like pointing towards this snake that's 15 feet away. I give it a huge berth. The next thing we're in is these giant rock slabs that are like 10 feet by 10 feet. Because when the glaciers came down through the United States, they dropped all the rocks in Pennsylvania. And so that's why there's all these slabs of rocks. And it's about a football field long. I'm 3/4 the way through. And I go to jump on this other rock, and I hear the metallic rattle of a snake. And I'm like, oh crap. I step back, almost hit the girl into a pit of snakes behind me. As soon as I had seen the pattern of that one snake on a rock, my eyes just naturally just saw the patterns everywhere. They're all behind us, in front of us, between the rocks. I couldn't believe I hadn't even seen them. So the girl who has been living in this like fairy tale land where nothing could really hurt her, she was like, I am going to jump over this snake. Told her, no way, definitely don't do it. She runs, jumps over the snake, snake lunges and misses. And she gets to the other side of the rock, basically says, you can come with me or you can stay on this rock. So now I'm stuck on the rock between the only way I can go is over this rattlesnake. And the rattlesnake, it never bites the first person. It always bites the second person.
Right.
Snake knows what the plan is to jump over it. So I run as fast as I can. I look like Air Jordan, probably the logo. Jump over the snake. Don't turn back. Just run right across all the rocks, and that was my snake story.
Rattlesnakes. So we obviously see them in films, but they are the ones with the tails at the back, and when they rattle, what does that mean when they're doing that action? Does that mean they're ready or they're scared?
So they're just making sure that that they're there. A snake can't kill you. It's not going to kill you unless you have some like conditions already. But what it will do is if you get bit by a snake, it'll be like you're tripping on shrooms, but you're in extreme pain. As your blood like coagulates inside of you or some crazy thing.
So it won't actually kill you then?
It won't kill you, but it'll mess you up.
Right. Okay. Yeah, snakes petrify me. I've only seen a few in Australia, but I don't think they're as hardcore as your snakes. I saw one when I was walking to this head point overlooking the Whitsundays on the East Coast, and it was there. I didn't even look. I wasn't even looking. I was just walking and just skittled away in front of me. I was like, whoa, what was that? In a second, gone. But I don't know what type of snake it was.
I was always under the impression that everything in Australia could kill you.
Oh, yeah. They've got 8 out of 10 world's deadliest snakes and spiders, right? Wherever it is. Yeah. A story that I have, spiders, is that when you go and work in remote camps in the north or in the outback, you're not allowed to wear flip-flops. It's a rule because the snakes and the spiders are just around the camp. So you have to wear these boots. And when you into like a cabin, you take the boots off, but you keep them in the cabin. Because if you keep them outside the cabin, they'll just like hide in the boot of your shoe. So you just have to be like on wearing boots all the time, wits about you, and don't leave anything outside. It's a pretty hardcore environment. So Appalachian Trail, you put here a very good comment, which I do adopt, but at a much lesser scale. You put it's all mental. So when my girlfriend gets annoyed at me about not training to do hikes, I said, don't worry about it. It's just mental. You just do it. Unless it's like a skill of rock climbing, or you got to do like, I don't know, a mountain face or something. Yeah, you got to probably do training, but like any walk or like trek up a hill, it's just mental. You just keep doing it. Because I'm like the most unfittest guy ever. You have to be pretty mentally tough to do that hike though, right? I don't doubt the physical challenge, but the mental challenge must be maybe even harder.
So when it comes to the long distance backpacking, a lot of people will point to the physical endurance of it all.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly it is a huge undertaking, but in the first month of doing a long distance hike, you're pretty physically fit at that point. So all the months after, for the most part, you're good. You just get more and more worn down as time goes on. I started in Georgia and went to Maine, so I was northbound. But by the time I had hit New Hampshire, which was nearing the end, I was running into people that were going southbound. And the southbounders had this impression that starting from the north and going down was you run into the biggest mountains right off the bat. So I would run into these crummy southbounders and they would say, oh, well, we just finished the hardest part of the trail. And I'd look at them and say, it's like this the whole way. And the advice that I got right before I hiked the trail, because I had never even been camping before, so everyone assumed that I was the biggest idiot in the world for ever even attempting it. One guy said, all you need to do is put one foot in front of the other, and that you do it long enough, it'll make a journey. The AT was technically 5 million steps to do.
Wow, that's insane. And how long did it take you to do?
It was 172 days, but after that, it pretty much made me a legend in the eyes of anyone I talked to. And when I was even at law school and I was applying to jobs, people wouldn't care anything about how I did in school or what I even thought of the law. They just wanted to hear some Appalachian Trail stories. That's it. Every question went back to the Appalachian Trail.
Is that because it's just that hard? Like, is that the only reason? Like, it's just known as a notoriously difficult end-to-end trail? Is that why?
Certainly, that is the case. A ton of people attempt it each year, but the year I did it, I think 95% of people quit or some crazy amount.
Huh.
It is an exceptionally long walk. You got to really have a reason to be out there if you're going to attempt such a thing.
And what was your reason?
Even though I had played sports and I had been pretty active within the community, I had set up 2 nonprofits when I was in Memphis for people that had Parkinson's. I had done all these things and people had kept coming up to me saying, "Oh, you're doing so much for the community," and all this other type of stuff. But I had felt like I hadn't done enough, and I had my own issues of anything that really tested my character. Because for a while, I was under the impression that sports were the test of character. Then I kind of realized that it wasn't really that hard. So I just needed to do something extreme that if I was able to do it, then, but I guess that's the explanation I give after I've hiked the trail. I think midway or during the trail, I had no idea why I was actually out there.
And did your girlfriend at the time complete it?
Yeah, she did. We made it through the Appalachian Trail. We didn't make it through the boat together.
Okay. I'd imagine that sort of trail and that trek is going to bring out some interesting sides of each person, right?
Certainly, we made it through the trail relatively intact. We had a few moments of anger and hatred, but the tip, if you're doing any long distance backpacking with a significant other, is have all of your own separate things. Separate water filters, separate sleeping bags, separate tents. So you have the ability to just walk away if you get into a fight and not be like, "Oh, he has the water, so I can't really just leave whenever I want." When I got the boat, it was very much my idea. It was like, we're going to live on a boat, and she had agreed to it. And another lesson I learned is that your dreams aren't necessarily your partner's dreams. So you have to really be clear and come to a consensus of what you want to do, or find someone that's into that type of lifestyle, which is exceptionally hard. Dating in the whole live aboard a boat thing, that's its own task.
Right. You got in the notes here, be good at communication. So I guess that's relating to all those things you just said.
Well, communication is huge no matter what, and I try to preach it all the time. When you live these extreme lifestyles, it's very easy to think that you're a singular individual, that you don't need others, and you're somehow disconnected from society, but everyone needs people. And I'd argue to say that the people that are total introverts that don't know anyone aren't very happy. And if you're going to be trying to start a business that you're able to work remote, well, you better be exceptional at communicating, because you have to start from scratch and build a business. And if you don't talk to people, if you don't know how to communicate effectively, that will severely hinder your whole attempt to go and work remote. Pretty much all the people I know that are solely remote, that travel the world and are able to work at a place for like 2 weeks each time, they all have extreme personalities with great communication skills.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think communication is probably, I'd say, number one, but also underrated. I think in the normal world, if you like, I don't think a lot of people realize or even understand it to an extent. And what I mean by that is what to say, when to say, who to, pick your moments, where to be risky with it. Like there's a lot to communication that I don't think a lot of people learn about.
Because I have to talk about communication all the time. If you look at communication, there's a gazillion books out there. And each one of these books only plays a small part within the larger whole of communication.
Mm.
Within communication, you have like conversation framing, you have body language, you have how you dress. There's so many different aspects to it. But if you're able to be successful at communication, you can pretty much almost do anything. That's why you've heard the stories of the con men who have somehow tricked people out of millions of dollars just by being able to communicate very effectively.
Yeah. I'm smiling because my my girlfriend finds it funny that sometimes on this podcast, and also we've got a mutual friend who's here, who doesn't live here anymore, and I'll give you an example. Like, I don't know, it's a real basic example. Like if he asked me, "Oh, that dish you cooked for us, is it going to taste any good?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, it'd be unbelievable." He said the way you say things like that when it's not true is so believable, and it kind of relates to this podcast sometimes when, like, she's listened and we've talked. I don't know, they say the guest has talked about a film. Oh, have you seen that film? Like, yeah, I've seen that film. Like, there's totally bullshit and blagging it. Like, just saying yeah because I want to be involved in the conversation, but I've not seen like 1 second of it. So you're always saying yes to things or claiming things that are not true. They believe you in terms of they think you know what's going on. I'm like, yeah, it's just like a bit of confidence, a bit of communication, isn't it? Like, I don't lie all the time. I'm just saying there's certain situations where I just know how to like bullshit your way through it.
For sure. Probably the meanest thing I've done with my communication skills and all my live aboard friends is one time I created a rumor that a flamingo, you know what a flamingo is?
Yeah, I've seen them. Yeah.
A flamingo was sighted in Boston Harbor. And people started talking about the flamingo. Everyone was like, have you seen the flamingo coming up to me? And after a month of this, and I was hanging out with all of them, I smoked a little bit of weed because it's illegal here.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, you know that flamingo story? I totally just made it up and you guys believed it. They were so pissed. They couldn't believe that I had lied about a flamingo. And I was like, it was the most unbelievable thing in the first place. What would this tropical bird have anything to do with up in New England?
And do you know what? Why are people so surprised about this? Because let's face it, our whole current, I don't get too deep here, our whole current system of economics, for example, is based on rumor and people making shit up. That's why the stock market goes up and down, because when it goes up, there's a rumor that there's going to be the next big thing, like the crypto is this one's next, and people get on it and they put money into it. And then, I don't know, 2 months down the line, it's back down to where it was. Like, it's all just rumor and people talking shit. That's all it is. So it dominates our social norms to a level that you probably don't even realize, I think, if people really analyzed it. Yeah, just kind of where I'm out of communication, really. But the question I've got to ask, though, Appalachian Trail, you were kind of a key character. Well, you were a key character in the book. Whose book is this? What is this book? How did that come about?
So the book is called I Only Go North by Peter Kunst. And essentially, I had a trail family at one point that I hiked with for 1,000 miles. And the guy ended up writing a book. So I obviously had to be a central character in it.
Is that a best-selling book, or is that quite a well-known book?
If I went back in time, I think I could have wrote a better version of it.
Of course.
But it does fairly well. It's got 5 stars, 4 stars. It's something that I can pull out at any time if I have guests over. And then they say, oh, let me see the book. And nah, you don't want to read it.
The Appalachian Trail, if someone's thinking about doing it, any just like quick tips for people?
Really come up with a reason why you would want to do such a thing. It does suck. 2, do not pre-pack all of your stuff. A lot of people have a tendency to drop mailboxes along the trail to resupply, but people will pack in the beginning and they'll assume that they love Pop-Tarts, for instance. But by 200 miles in, they don't want to have Pop-Tarts anymore, but they're going to have Pop-Tarts for the next 2,000 miles. So don't pre-pack. And then, third one, come up with something extraordinarily difficult to do before you do the Appalachian Trail to really test yourself. What I did is I made 1,000 origami cranes, which still to this day I consider the hardest thing I've ever done. So I did that.
Okay. PCT trail, just going to quickly ask about that. Have you thought about that trail or have an interest in it?
Well, with all of the different extremes, there's a tendency to not want to go back to society and just live out the rest of your days hiking. That's not something I wanted to do.
Okay.
I saw a lot of my friends, they finished the AT and then they went back to kind of the same job, worked, under the impression that they were going to quit, do the PCT, which they did, and then they would do the CDT, and then all of a sudden they're back to the same place that they were before and wasted 6 years of not figuring out. Because I think that at any point when you do an adventure, you have to be thinking in kind of a long term. How can I long term be able to figure out my job security in the future, or how I'm going to make money, or if I want to have kids? So you shouldn't just go from adventure to adventure with really no plan besides doing the next adventure.
Yes, that's what I've been doing in my 20s. 100% work, I don't know, a job, mostly shit, save money, adventure, no fallback, no backup, back to start, somewhere different, new job, that kind of stream of crappy jobs, save, travel, crappy jobs, save, travel, right? Whereas this time it's different. I'm like, now what can I do with the travels, but also maybe prolong it or even use it to make an income or do something, right? That's what's changed.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that comes with age, I'm not sure, but yeah, you're right about that. Okay, and also the New England Trail, don't know anything about it, so that sounds like a less hardcore trail than Appalachian.
The New England Trail is actually one of the scenic trails in the United States. Is like 8 of them, which include the AT, the PCT, and the CDT. The New England Trail goes from the coast of Connecticut to the Massachusetts-New Hampshire border. It's only 220 miles.
Oh, okay.
But that sucked so bad. Because it was such a new trail, no one really had ever thru-hiked it before. So I was one of the first people to ever do it. But there was no water. There was no streams. It was all on this ridge line. And so I would go 30 miles, 35 miles with no water. It got to the point where if I hit a road, I would start walking down the street, banging on people's doors, asking them for water, which a good chunk of them were confronted by this stranger. Yeah. So that sucked. And then I also had done it in the winter. I started in October, and I had never accounted that the sun went down at 4 or 5 o'clock. So as soon as the sun went down, it became unbearably cold. And then you'd set up your tent, you try to force yourself to sleep, and you'd wake up at midnight having already slept a ton of hours and not be able to go back to sleep. It was a terrible, terrible decision. I did it by myself. The first day I stepped on the trail, I even questioned myself. I was like, I hate the woods. I don't even know why I'm out here. But I finished it. I fought through it, finished it.
How long was that in total?
It took 22 days. It was 220 miles.
Okay.
I did a lot of drugs. It was fun. It's kind of where I came up with several of my businesses that I have today. Just going out and then reflecting on things.
Yeah.
I think going out and doing these long distance hikes, you can listen to so much educational stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of people will put on music and hike, and it's just like, oh man, you're wasting all your time. You could be listening to all these different books about business or different industries, and then essentially come up with how you can enter into that. I spent the entire time hiking the trail listening to books and podcasts. So if anything, I thought it was like a fast track to getting an MBA.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. I'd be tempted to do music because that's just what I studied at university. I'm just into it. But you're right, it is a bit of a waste. I'd probably do it for an hour just to get me going, but the amount of stuff you could learn. Oh, yeah. I think that's the same with just travel in general. If you're doing long-term travel, I don't know, you got a train ride for 3 hours. God, whack on a business podcast or a self-help one, whatever it is. It's too much to learn.
For sure.
You put here lonely though, so I guess you've done it on your own.
Yeah, the NET was so unbelievably lonely. It was to the point of loneliness that I had called all my ex-girlfriends while I was walking. I had this thought, was it me? Called him up. At the end of it, I was like, no, it was totally them. So it all worked out. But yes, it was very lonely of a trail.
Okay, that's great. I've got some quick fire questions about that at the end. Most important thing you packed, all this sort of stuff. Got a random question here. A few questions about travel, like, is it sustainable?
So I guess it depends on what level of sustainable you're talking about. In terms of the boating side of it, if you think of sailboats, you might think that's relatively sustainable. But when I hear the word sustainable, the only thing I can really think about is like zero energy use. But that is seemingly impossible with everything, right? If you have an electric car, you're charging it with electricity that's being produced from a coal-driven power plant. Or if you're on a sailboat, even though you have the wind, you still have a diesel engine, and they haven't really found a way of making electric sailboat engines, really. So is it sustainable? To a point in which you're using substantially less earths than most people, but it's not something that's fully sustainable yet, in my mind.
And my next question is the purpose of travel.
What is the purpose of travel? That's a good one. I think it comes down to experiences, and the more experiences you have, I personally believe it expands your vocabulary of emotions. That's something that you can't really get anywhere else. If you meet new people and you meet new cultures and you have all these experiences and these memories, you're able to express everything differently. People can read it off you.
Yeah, community is probably arguably number one, 100%. Also, when you traveled on your boat, you mentioned before that there's like a community of you together now. Like, I don't know if it's in Boston or other places, but you know people in your like niche type of living now, right? So that is now a community, would you say?
Well, it's certainly fascinating, the whole boat life thing, because unlike anywhere else, you run into so many different cultures and nationalities. Everyone that's my neighbor comes from different countries. So even though I haven't traveled to other countries, I've experienced the individual and the culture of so many different places around the world. And then also being in Marine, what I tell people is that it's not like we're landlocked with how we conduct business, but we're all connected by this one seascape. So I talk to people around the world all the time.
Yeah, okay. I've got a random thought. Like you mentioned the sailing boat and sailboat. The first thing that came to my mind, I just, when you're talking about there, is the OC. Have you seen the OC?
I have not.
No, it's not brilliant, but there's a scene at one of the end of the seasons where they all just have, a bit of a nightmare and they all get fed up. And I think Seth just goes off on a sailboat into the sea off California. He's off on his own. Like an idyllic image of him just like, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to leave land. I'm going to get on a sailboat and just go off. That's like one of the last scenes. I don't know why I thought of that.
I've certainly heard those stories before where some person just gets sick and tired of it and then just leaves. It's some incredible stories out there, especially in the boat world. I feel like you get a lot of people that have reached the end of the line in terms of what they were doing before. And they're like, oh, I've had the craziest neighbors. One neighbor, he got arrested by the FBI. He was robbing jewelry stores. My neighbor. And then another neighbor got arrested not too long ago. It was all over Boston News. And the title of the article was Serial Entrepreneur. And he was a con artist. And he had conned millions of dollars from these investors in this pyramid scheme-like thing. So all the neighbors are crazy in their own way.
It's because they're not conformed to the social norms. Like, maybe they're not crazy. Maybe they're just a bit different. Like, people might listen and go, "Oh yeah, they're crazy," but they're just not doing the same 9 to 5 condo life, right? Which we mostly do.
Well, being on the boat and being on the water in general, the idea of laws is kind of
Oh,
strange,
yeah.
right? Because if you go out far enough, no one really knows what could happen. The general things that people think about in regards to like the police or laws or how to act civilly just aren't really existent in marine. I guess it gives people the idea that, oh, they can do
Mm.
whatever they want type deal. But that's what I run into with my business, a ton of pirates. And having to deal with pirates is a unique type of communication skill.
How would you define a pirate?
I would define a pirate by anyone who basically will swindle someone for material gain. So
Okay.
I'll give you a story, my own
Yeah.
piracy. I was driving this $1 million boat. It was this 40-foot power boat. We're flying through the harbor. It was some other guy's boat, and there was all these girls on the back, and we go by this small boat that's way outside the harbor, but clearly they're having issues, and they have these 2 oars, and they're trying to row into the Boston harbor. And we go right by him. The owner of the boat comes up to me, says, "Should we stop?" I'm like, no, keep going. And then I say, oh, maybe we should help them. Turn around, go up. They basically say that their engine's screwed and could you throw us a line? So we throw him a line. I tell the owner to start driving the boat, drive it slow, and we'll bring him to his marina. So I go up to the back of the boat and I, wave to the guy, get his attention on his boat, and I signal the digits to call me. So he calls me and I say, "Listen, man, I'm going to cut your line and you're going to be stuck out here unless you Venmo me $500 right now." And so he said, "Oh my God." And he Venmo me $500. And I don't tell anyone on the boat about it. And we drop him off and they're like, "Oh, we did a good service." And I got back to the marina with $500. I was like, hell yeah. Piracy.
Piracy. Bloody hell. Okay. That's interesting. What choices you got? Yeah. You put here Canada sailing. So have you got anything in the pipeline in 2023?
Planning on, because now I have a girl who's a teacher. So for 3 months of the year during the summer,
Yeah.
no school. And
Yeah.
so the plan is to sail to Nova Scotia and then bounce
Dream.
around through Maine. Plus, I plan on going to Germany at some point. So it seems like quite a traveling year. Suffice it to say that I better get my shit together over the winter and have all the businesses really moving.
That's great. You mentioned Canada before we started recording, actually. You went to Montreal. How did you find that?
So I had gone to Montreal to play lacrosse, and we were a high school team. So got up there, and obviously being young Americans, we're like, the drinking age is 18 and prostitution is legal. So of course we went out into the city, checked it out. I mean, it was pretty unbelievable. I had never experienced anything like it, and it holds some memory deep down. But I haven't been there since. I thought the whole area was quite beautiful. I'm going to have to, at some point, make a trip up there.
Yeah. Have you been to anywhere else in Canada or just there?
Oh, Niagara Falls.
Okay. Classic. But yeah, actually, that's a good question or thought. As a young American, because of the drinking age is 21, I just assume in America, like, people still drink when they're 18 because you get fake ID or you get someone to buy it for you. Is that not the case?
Well, I think fake IDs have become a lot harder to really be able to use, especially with all the scanners that they have these days.
Yeah.
And I don't know what kids these days are doing, but I could imagine that many of them are likely sheltered. So they probably don't have too many of these drinking experiences.
It's crazy because you go to university at 18, don't you? In US, maybe 19.
Sure, you can go and join the military at 18 and still not be able to drink.
In the UK, if you go to university, that's basically the whole point. You just go drinking for about 2 or 3 years.
Oh, I mean, certainly drank in college, had access to it.
Yeah. It's just a bit annoying though, isn't it? Because it's not like easy access. You have to like do a bit of admin to get it. You can't just walk down the shop and get it. Or go out to a bar.
Gotta have some communication skills to talk to the older person to convince them to give you some alcohol.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're right on that. Yeah, fair point. Fair point. Okay, we're gonna dip into your companies now. So the first one is Shipshape. So you are the owner, CEO. So what is that as a company?
So Shipshape is the National Directory of Marine Repair and Refit. So many people might be familiar with Angie's List or Home Advisor or Thumbtack, and it's on the scheme of essentially a marketing tool. We connect boat owners and yacht owners to service providers. The thing I'll say is that technology is still in the early days. And so a lot of the things that presently exist, it's not necessarily true that those models of how business is conducted is going to be the future.
Yeah.
So I think everything is going to eventually move to being more niche oriented. So you have the Angie's List and the Thumbtacks. Well, soon there's going to be a platform that's just to find watch repair people. Or there's going to be a platform that finds couch repairs or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think everything is moving towards that. So there is a lot of opportunity for people to jump into niches that don't have a lot of the technology that exists in the mainstream industries. So have Shipshape, and then MIDA, which is the Marine Industry Digital Agency. We do web development, build platforms, market, all of that type of stuff. I quickly built a winning team right off the bat, and that's pretty much what has led to my success, is just being able to meet people. And my team is quite global. I have a ton of people in Pakistan, in Dubai, in England, in Canada, US. So if you have access to a global workforce, why wouldn't you use it? So I got that. And then I have the Shipshape podcast. And our goal is to try to create awareness of the ocean. A lot of people have never even seen the ocean, which is, interesting to think about.
Yeah.
And no one really knows what's going on. And being a thought leader on my side of the industry, you see on the news all of these things that are happening with the ocean and climate change. But many of the people that are involved in the communication at that national level aren't talking about things that are even feasible to happen or even know what the issue is that exists. So the goal with the podcast was to create an entertaining, educational medium in which not only could we attract people that have never even seen the ocean, but we could attract professional sailors. We could attract people in the business of boating, aquaculture, climate change. So we've been rolling with that for a while. Podcast has certainly afforded me to meet the most legendary sailors that ever existed, which is fun.
Yeah, they're your fellow peers, right? In a different kind of way. Umbrella, you're all the same. You've got different factions down, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've certainly heard people be like, oh, you should try to focus on your own niche with the podcast or with whatever you're doing. But in my mind, I'm like, nah, everyone needs to know about this. And my job is more of creating awareness than it is to find a little niche and then just fit inside a small little box.
Yeah, I think the niche comes later, maybe. I think if you start out as a niche, I don't think that would work. I think you get into podcasting and meet people and you might figure something out 2 years down the line, like, oh, okay, we could go down that direction. You said something there quite interesting, actually, about the two things that I picked up on that. One, yeah, that idea that you are going to have technology that is so specific to things, like you say, like, I don't know, how to get your couch fixed, how to get your purse fixed, like that could go really granular, which is crazy because the options are endless. Like you just look in your room like, oh yeah, someone could fix that you don't know how to get someone to fix that. Then in the future, there could be like one app or one thing that would help you with that. Yeah, it's mental. And also the story about people never seeing the ocean. Real weird. Watched a podcast last night about a guy who was wrongly imprisoned in Britain for murder he didn't commit. And he was, 12 years in prison. I think he was in there. But he grew up in London. So a lot of people in London are, not the most affluent, so don't really go outside of London. And he's like, grew up in London, stayed in London, got put in prison for 12 years, came out, was free because he got let go because he wasn't the person, and went on holiday for the first time on a plane at age 32. And he'd never seen the beach before. He went to Spain. He's like, what is this? Like beach, water, waves. Yeah, he just couldn't believe the sound of the wave. He thought it was someone like coming to attack him or something. That's crazy that people have not seen the ocean. That's mental. And also, you publish weekly episodes. What platforms can we find you on?
So we're on any podcast streaming platform. You can find us there. And then we just started moving some of our episodes over to YouTube, where we're also starting to make a history series, because who would have thunk that no one has in the past 10 years really come up with like top 10 shipwrecks or like top 10 battleships. So it's just this huge untapped market where, I tell people that they should get into niches and then be the champion of their niche. But because I'm a real marine guru, I spend most of my day telling people that they should get into marine because there is so much opportunity.
What do you talk about on your podcast when you get these guests on? Is it just what they've done, or do you have a common subject, or what's the plan when you speak to someone on your podcast?
So the beginning part is usually personal, and then the second part is more business focused. But the thing about marine is that, as I had mentioned earlier, people just stumble into it. And so usually you have the craziest stories to tell about how you landed in marine, and then everything about marine is slightly, extreme. So it's always a fascinating, engaging story. But the backdrop of it all is that to be a player in the industry, it's not who you know, but who likes you. And it's very cutthroat. That just makes it so engaging to hear.
Oh, interesting. Cutthroat, is it? Is that a problem because you don't get people on merit? I'm not sure.
Well, in marine, because I deal with a lot of other industries. I do go to networking events, and I'm considered a master networker just in general. That because marine is almost entirely still word of mouth and requires you to have exceptional communication skills to do anything.
Yeah.
When I go and meet people from other industries, it's like I'm playing in the major leagues, and I'm now in like, the third tier rookie league type thing.
Right. Okay. Who's the audience that listens to your podcast, do you think? Or who's it for, maybe?
A good chunk of the people that listen to the podcast are CEOs, founders. We have a whole segment of people that are sailors, and then we have kids or people just thinking about entering into the industry. So it's a wide range of people. We've started to do some influencers. There's surprisingly a huge amount of YouTube sailing influencers. I would have never thought it before.
That sounds niche.
I mean, there's over 40 of these sailing YouTube channels that have over 200,000 followers. They're making money off of YouTube. And essentially all you need to do is be consistent and have a smoking hot girlfriend that can be the thumbnail of all the images.
Yeah, it's amazing how that is so effective.
We did an interview with this girl who was an influencer in sailing, and she had 200,000 followers, and she looked very pretty when we did the interview. I was like, wow. And then I'm on Reddit trying to post for the podcast and sailing, and I type in sailing, and I see her name, first name _ last name. So I'm thinking to myself, wow, she's really working hard to promote her show, and I can't believe she's going to this extent. So I click on it, and the first thing that pops up is there's 3,000 followers to this page, and it's just they had taken screenshots from the YouTube from different revealing positions of her, and then would just post it. I was like, I can't believe this, but I guess you can get followers that way, right?
Yeah, you can. The influencers on Instagram are just a bit annoying. The example I have, I used to follow someone who's a golf correspondent. She's quite pretty, very good looking, but she is supposed to be a golf correspondent, and I think she probably is in her real life, but she's also an influencer because all she ever posts on her grid is her just wearing some sort of outfit or wearing a bag and looking good. I'm like, well, where's the golf content? Like, the Masters is on, like the biggest golfing event, and you're not even talking about it. You're talking about the bag you've got. I'm like, oh, this world is just get me out of it. So yeah, I had to unfollow because it's just a bit ugh. Like, if you're a golf correspondent, talk about golf. If you're an influencer who likes to pose and be like a model type thing, say that. Don't say you're a golf correspondent. Yeah, it's a weird world. It'd be like me saying I'm a travel influencer and just like posting pictures of me with my haircut. That people want to see travel stuff, right?
Well, there's probably a market for that, right?
Yeah, there probably is. Yeah. For websites, where can we find your businesses?
So you can find the platform Shipshape on www.shipshape.pro, and then MIDA, you can find it on www.mida.pro.
Got it. Thank you very much. I'll put the links in the show notes so people can access them pretty quickly. And we're going to finish with I'm going to buck some questions at you. Hey, yeah, just a quick one. I just want to say there are many ways to support this podcast. You can buy me a coffee and help support the podcast with $5. Or you can go to my merch store with the affiliate link with TeePublic, where there's plenty of merch available to buy, such as t-shirts, jumpers, hoodies, and also some children's clothing. Thirdly, which is free, you can also rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, or Good Pods. Also, you can find me on social media on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. Simply just search for Winging It Travel Podcast, and you'll find me displaying all my social media content for traveling, podcast, and other stuff. Thank you. Can you name 3 countries that you've not been to that are really like next on your hit list that you'd love to go to?
Well, I really want to go to Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And then I want to go and check out Sweden. And I want to check out Iceland.
Okay. For your hiking that you've done, what was the hiking boots that you wore, and would you recommend them?
So the trick about long distance hiking is you don't wear boots. They'll kill you. You wear trail runners, sneakers.
Okay, yeah.
Because the boots, they're not really good at, they're good at like keeping water out, but they're not good at letting the water out of the boot when your feet are sweating. So people could get trench foot pretty easily if they have like the waterproof boots. Essentially, you want to have something that can dry out relatively fast.
Ah, okay. And in your backpack, what was the one thing that was like crucial to your trip?
Probably my tobacco pipe.
And did you journal?
I tried to journal, and so it's like fragments of like 2 weeks spread out, and it looks like someone's descent into madness.
Okay. If you were to do it now, would you podcast? Little microphone and like do like a little daily update and create a podcast out of it?
I don't know. I've looked at a lot of the trail hiking podcasts, and I feel even with some of the YouTube channels of the trail hiking people, eventually you run into a point where you're like, I just don't want to hike any more trails. But they've made like their whole niche off of trail hiking, so it's almost like they're forced into it.
They've got to do it. Yeah. I hear you on that.
So I probably wouldn't do it.
Okay, fair enough. When you're hiking, I know you probably don't want it anymore, but is there one trail that's maybe not in US, but maybe somewhere else in the world that you'd love to do?
Well, I've heard that the PCT in the United States is absolutely gorgeous. It's 2,600 miles, and it goes through the desert, it goes through the mountains, it goes through the forests. I've heard that was spectacular. I just don't know when I would have another 6 months to just mess around, because at this point in my life, I'm like, oh, well, I've had a ton of adventures. I still want to have adventures. I literally just turned 30. So like 2 weeks ago. So I'm sitting there being like,
congrats.
Holy crap, I did so much stuff in my 20s. what the hell can I possibly do in my 30s that can live up to all those experiences? So, but I do realize that as I get older, I need to have somewhat of a plan to make things sustainable. I made a post online at one point because I was so desperate to find a girl that was willing to sail way harder than you'd imagine. So I posted, the photo of the boat, me, about what the plan was. I wanted to go sailing. Any girls want to come on the boat? Oh boy, did I get a bashing online. People were furious. You sick son of a, and I'm just sitting there being like, I'm not a bad guy. And there were either people that despised me or people that defended me, and I absolutely received no help. But one girl reached out to me, and basically she says, "Oh, so what's the plan?" And I was like, "Listen, I'm all about trying to figure out how we can sustainably be able to travel and do this at the same time. So, like, what do you have going on with your work? How can you contribute in any way?" And it seemed like she just assumed that you would have the money in order to be able to go do it.
Got
right?
it. Yeah.
So, but in my case, it's very much like balancing being able to live comfortably and be able to travel at the same time.
That right there is a dream. That is, for me anyway, personally, that is the goal, is to have both of those and do both of those. Yeah, as we said before, still trying to work that out. Yeah, thanks Merill for coming on to the podcast. It's been a great chat. I've learned a lot actually. Some of your stories are pretty funny and quite unique for the podcast. So I'm really excited to get those out there.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to when it's published.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for listening to my Winging It Travel podcast episode today. You can find me on Instagram at James Hammond Travel or Winging It Travel Podcast. You can search for both. I release weekly clips of this podcast episode, as well as photos from the last 8 to 10 years of my travels. You can also follow me on TikTok, Facebook and Pinterest by searching Winging It Travel Podcast. I do release daily content to do with travel and the podcast throughout the week. Also check out my website, jameshammond.org. There's content about myself, my travels, and there's also a newsletter sign up as well as a contact form. Finally, please rate and review the podcast on Podchaser. This is my platform of choice. Alternatively, you can rate this on Apple or wherever you get your podcasts from. This really helps the podcast gain a bit of traction for the future in terms of guests and content. And I'm glad to see that you guys are listening out there, reviewing it and enjoying the content so far. Stay safe, stay humble, keep listening, keep traveling, and I'll catch you soon. Cheers, James.